not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Okay, let me start off by saying good morning to all, and thank you for tuning in to the February the 15th edition of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and again, thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I'd like to give another thank you out to Mr. Fuller for agreeing to go an extra little session last week. That was wonderful. And I'd like to thank you for calling in, and we were able to service all the calls last week, and that was very good. A little bit unusual, but it was very good. So thank you to the producers also that produced that, and from what I understand, very good feedback from that. So thank you for listening, and thank you for practicing getting constructive results, CR, which, by the way, if you are new to the program, you will hear that word, constructive results, all throughout this program, along with getting any material and books from the ProduceJustice.com website. That is ProduceJustice.com website, where you can get all the materials that Mr. Fuller will be speaking about today. Let me see here. Yes, I think I can do it this way. Second of all, let me say good morning to you, Mr. Fuller. Good morning.
Good morning.
All righty. And Mr. Fuller has mentioned on several broadcasts that we have about the importance of having a will and a trust or to that effect. And so I had mentioned a site as a suggestion, not as a directive, but as a suggestion, doyourownwill.com. I went to that site and checked it out and did a few things with that, but also in the process of doing that, I also am looking into the difference between a will and a trust. And I'm suggesting that you may want to look at that to see what benefits you the most. This is not a one-size-fits-all deal. Check that out and do that so that you can, as a suggestion, so that you can be ready or provide for when that day happens. Mr. Fuller, you have mentioned this several times, and for those that do not know or maybe weren't tuned into that program before we go on with today's program, what is the importance of having a will or a trust?
Well, to the best of my understanding, and that's what's been told to me, and that's why I got both. If I understand what they mean by trust, what they mean by will is whatever your will is. If anybody passes on, whatever the person who is going to die, and we're all going to at some point, you want everything to go smoothly for the people who are going to be handling whatever you left behind, so that everybody gets what the person who has passed on would like for them to have, an old photograph or an old clock or something like that, or money or a car or a house or land. And there's no disputes about it. There's no people going back and forth and arguing, because a lot of so-called quote-unquote family arguments break out, or people are just worn out from dealing with lawyers and going back and forth and paperwork and paperwork and paperwork and paperwork. People who have never had to deal with a whole lot of paperwork before. Sometimes it just turns out to be stacks of it. And you're signing here and signing there, and you don't know what you're doing. So if you have a will, it makes it very simple. You can have 100 people there. I mean, when the will is read by a lawyer, if the occasion calls for that, but the lawyer would just look at it, or a judge, if it goes that far, and just simply say, it says here that Mr. Ralph Jones left everything, just a couple of paragraphs, to his Aunt Susie. And it gives a full name here, and that's that. And, it's 200 people say, well, Aunt Susie, I mean, well, yeah, but I mean, and people going back and forth who are there to hear the will being read, but the decision is made. I'm looking at a piece of paper here. Just one piece of paper. And it's got 2 paragraphs on it, saying a few things, preliminary. But it says that everything from this person who is now deceased is going to his Aunt Susan V. Jones. That's what it says. And it's got his signature on it, and it's all been notarized and et cetera. A witness to the signature, and that's it. And so all of, is Miss Jones here? Yes, I'm Miss Jones. She holds up her hand. Well, you got everything. You got the boat, and you got the 2 houses, and everything in it, all the bank accounts. That's it. I mean, I don't know what the rest of y'all are here for, whoever you are. Looks like, the deceased left behind quite an estate, and that attracts a whole bunch of people. You suddenly got cousins coming out of the woodwork you didn't know you had. But, hey, everything's going to Miss Jones. Next case. See, that's simple.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can leave a will, every last one of the people in there can contest that will and say all kinds of things. Well, she wanted me, she told me, and she told me, and then the other one says, no, I was the last one to talk to her. And she told me right out of her mouth that I was supposed to get this, that, and the other. And so people actually fall out. People have gotten along for years. Sometimes it's left somebody who's not even a relative. But if that's what the will says, that's where everything is going. All down through the years, all kinds of stories about people leaving everything to their cat. They say, well, my cousin, he didn't know what he was doing. He was mentally disabled. Everybody knows that. And so, yeah, he wrote some kind of mess down, almost as a joke when he was of sound mind and saying he's leaving everything to his cat. Well, that's what they found. They said that's his last will and testament. They found it in his dresser drawer. So it says the cat didn't even have a name. Just leave it to cat, But he's talking about the cat that was with him when he died. And that's it. And we put an administrator in charge of it, see to it that the cat is able to handle his $800,000. That's been left behind, and all the rest of y'all can go home and brood about it because it's going to the cat. Next case.
Next case.
That's why.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's why you should have a will.
Okay, well said. Thank you, Ms. Carr, who gave me some suggestions. Speaking about a will and a trust. Thank you. Miss Carr. Okay, before we get to the phone lines, let me give you these numbers to get in contact with the show, as John in Houston, Marcus in Long Beach, and Ray in Dallas. This is the number that you call. It is 516-453-9921, and do like they did. Press the number 1 button, and when you do that, a hand will come up on my screen indicating that you have a question or a comment, which is referred to as a VGQ. And if you do, or when you do, and I'm going to ask this again, and please, ma'am, please, sir, don't abuse this. Make it brief, please. I'm asking you again because I may have to cut you off. I don't want to do that. So make it brief. Okay. You can also contact the show by the Gmail, which is the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Now, the Gmails will be read at a time when we don't have very many phone calls, because I was under the understanding that we are going to stress that we get all the calls in, or as many as we can. And as you saw last week, those who were with the show, we were permitted to go over 10 minutes last week, and it turned out that all the calls were answered. So we're going to push the calls. So if you do decide to use the Gmail, again, that's the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com, it will be the second on the priority. The third way that you can also listen to the show, or maybe even have a question, although it will not necessarily be read, is by going into the chat room. And all you have to do for that is to go to blogtalkradio.com. Then you want to get on programs and go to the Produce Justice show. When you click on that, then there's a little icon, a little area where it says chat or chat room. You push that, and you are in the chat room. And they have some very, very good conversations that go on in there. So govern yourselves accordingly. Okay, Mr. Fuller, a question from the Gmails is simply this. It comes from Diva2. She said this: Mr. Fuller, last week you said white supremacists use sex to confuse black people. Considering that black people only make up a small population of the concept called America and are not represented heavily in the media, why is it that the media is pushing so many black or so many transgendered black males to the forefront? What's the benefit, or what is white supremacy trying to get out of black men turning into black women?
According to the code, anyone who is saying anything about promoting anything, if it's cotton candy, should give the reason why they're promoting it. Anyone, doesn't matter what area of activity, whether it falls under economics or sex or religion. If a person wants you to join their religion, they should give reasons. Just say, I have a religion, and I want you to join me in practicing my religion, the religion I'm offering you, which you don't have now. So the white supremacists want black people to have anything that will weaken them. That's the reason that they can stay in business. So in all areas of activity, the white supremacists are code, and it's all about codifying everything so that whatever the victims of white supremacy, the non-white people of the known universe, are into, the white supremacists want you to be all the way into it so that you become weaker and not stronger as far as producing what? Constructive results. The only constructive results that the white supremacists want any people of color to have is constructive results that work for white people only. They don't want any constructive results coming to non-white people. Because when non-white people are doing things that are constructive, whether it's in economics or education or entertainment or sex, then they become constructive people. And you don't want your slaves to become constructive, and that constructive activity is not turned over to you. You don't want your slaves learning how to invent things and all like that, unless they're going to take those inventions and give them to you. Now, slaves have invented things. George Washington Carver, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if I own you, anything that you have, if you're my slave, and that's what ownership is to a person, you own a person, that's a slave. Everything that you have, everything that your mind comes up with, belongs to me. Why? Because you belong to me. You're my property. And that's what ownership in the system of white supremacy is all about.
Mm-hmm.
People who are classified as white and who have decided to be white supremacists, their objective, their reason for being, is to own non-white people and have them produce things that are constructive for them. But they want the non-white people to do everything against themselves and glamorize it so that it looks like it is constructive. So they advertise it. I mean, they want you to, they say, hey, look at the cocaine that I've got out here. It makes you feel great. I mean, hey, don't you, all you dark people line up. I got plenty of it, tons of it. I'll distribute it to you. Pass it on to your children, generation after generation. Make you feel good about your situation. Don't you want to feel good about your bad situation? Well, this will make you feel good about it. It won't cure your situation, but you'll be feeling good about it. And so they do the same thing in answer to the question with sex.
Yes, sir. Okay. From the chat room, Justice Warrior said this: the benefit is population control, for one. Just like this pandemic was created for that purpose, but the transgender LGBTQ community propaganda is to push it hard on black people because we are the one group who's traditionally been against the spread of non-traditional family structure. Initially, they did it with the Great Society and welfare programs, slavery being the first, but now they're using this methodology in popular culture. Mr. Fuller is spot on as well in that it's to make us weaker. John, Houston, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question? Wait a minute, John. Okay, there you go. Good morning.
Grand Rising, gentlemen, Mr. Bobby. Amen, Mr. Fuller. And I gather this is a VGQ. Honor thy mother and thy father so that thy days may be long. If my grandparents were labeled colored, my parents were called Negro, and I am called black, all of these things are a lie. And so I'm not certain how we're going to ever produce justice, because justice cannot come through lies. So the truth, Mr. Fuller, this morning I am asking you, how shall we ever have the truth? Because what's in a name is not what you call me, it's what I answer to. But if I don't know what that is, I will continue under those labels and those lies. And I'll need to listen to hold. Mr. Bobby, thank you both. Have a great morning.
All right. Mr. Fuller, response, please.
That's the first thing when you get ready to do anything, find out the truth. That's if you're going to even do some plumbing. You find out how do you go about doing plumbing in order for you to have water, or whatever it is that you're doing the plumbing for. So it's a matter of finding out. And how do you find out things? Asking questions. Question everything of other people who already know, or if it seems like nobody knows, then you set your mind to work to find out what the truth is about which way is east, which way is west, and how best to go in any directions you want to go in. And you use your brain for that, because along with the body, the creator of the universe provided creatures called people with a brain. The white supremacists teach black people, non-white people, don't use your brain. I'll do all the brain work. You just jump up and down and spin around, and stand on your head. You do all the body work, I'll do the brain work. And I'll also do the body work, all right, for myself. But you black people don't use your mind for anything except to repeat after me and do all the things that I dump on you that I tell you is so great. And don't question anything. A black slave, or any kind of slave that raises questions is extremely dangerous. Don't you ever ask me a question. Just do what I tell you to do. Take that to the bank. Don't even, don't question it. Just do it. You'll be all right. I'll see to it you're all right. I'll guarantee it. That's the voice of the white supremacists. And it has worked. It has worked better than any other system ever thought of. The system of white supremacy in dominating and mistreating people.
Yes, sir.
There's no system has ever been proven superior to it.
All right.
And how do you do it? In answer to the question, you start using your brain to solve problems, to get what? Constructive results.
Constructive results.
And anytime you start getting constructive results out of what you are doing and saying, the white supremacists will look at you and you're a person of color, and they'll say, now this has got to stop. Because no person of color is supposed to do anything ever that has constructive value unless I assign it to them.
All righty. Good morning, Linda Benson. Good morning to you. All right, let's go out to the left coast, to the home of the champions. That's just the city of Los Angeles, but this gentleman is in Long Beach, but I imagine he might be celebrating. Marcus, hey, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning.
And yes, Mr. Bobby, we are celebrating down here in Long Beach with Snoop Dogg all on top of the stadium. It was amazing. My question for you this morning, Mr. Fuller, is do you think you can expound on the statement that you make, quote, unquote, where do the white folks go? I know it's real simple, but I think it's extremely profound.
Well, to put it in simple terms, I call it the master contradiction. Master means, it can't get any bigger than that, all right? Contradiction is a simple statement I recently came up with. The system of white supremacy is not easy to destroy because it produces most of the things that most people enjoy. The system of white supremacy is not easy to destroy. Why? Because it produces most of the things, underlying things, that most people enjoy. There's never been, in recorded history as far as I know, any system of government that has produced more things that people really get a big kick out of, or get a lot of convenience out of, or get a lot of joy out of. Awards and all like that, and singing and dancing and food and automobiles and airplanes. So you say, well, what's wrong with white supremacy if it produces so many things? You can go in outer space. Couldn't do that before. White supremacy, No recorded history shows that when people were doing that. People were walking around wishing they had wings. I mean, sometimes in old paintings, that's what you find. You find people with wings on their back. That would be very inconvenient anyway, to walk around with wings. Got to carry a bunch of wings around. You've seen paintings, I have, of people with wings. I wouldn't want any wings on my back. They say when you get to heaven, you'll have wings. What do you need wings in heaven for? I mean, we've got to be reasonable. But a lot of paintings show that, but they are paintings. It's not real. The Creator didn't make anybody with wings, as far as I know. And if anybody was made with wings, they would always be fighting to put those wings somewhere when they sit down in a chair. What are you going to do with your wings? I mean, you go to a theater and you got wings all in everybody's face. I mean, come on. That's what I mean by logic. Black people have just been trained, just like animals. You train them. And they say, well, I get to heaven, I don't get my wings. Wait a minute. Wings in heaven? I mean, we don't ask questions because we've been trained not to. By whom? By the usual suspects, the white supremacists. But the code says you ask questions about everything, including everything that Neely Fuller says. And don't be modest about that, because of what? This is how all progress is made. So the white supremacists, if I think I'm in line with your question, they produce things that fascinate people, that are convenient for people, that cure people. So what's wrong with white supremacy if it's so powerful that it produces all these wonderful things that everybody enjoys? It throws away millions of people in the process. It's like you're producing things in a factory and then throwing away the people who are producing the things that you're producing. After they get off from work, you line them up and shoot them all. Or you poison them all. Or you give them poison food. Or you give them drugs in their arms. And then condemn them for being late for work. It destroys people deliberately. That's not something that they do accidentally in the process of producing things. Why? Because they get fun and glory out of doing just that, being destructive. That's why they worship all type of weaponry. Anything that's going to destroy something, they worship it. Gun worshipers, sword worshipers. You can look at pictures depicting, under the system of white supremacy, all the religious people in the world. And look at the number of people who are carrying some type of weapon for killing people. All the people with swords. In most of the religions throughout the world. Because the greatest artists, the most prolific artists in the world, are white supremacists. Or people who were raised up in the system of white supremacy. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. And thank you, Marcus, from Long Beach. I got a little message for you from one of our listeners, and I'll read that to you. You're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on blogtalkradio.com. This show will also be reproduced on producejustice.com immediately after today's show. Now, if you would like to get in contact with today's show, you can by dialing this number, which is 516-453-9921, and to make sure that you press the number 1 button if you have a question or a comment, and please be brief in making that. You can also get in contact with the show by using my Gmail address. That is 7MrBobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. And I will eventually, at some point, get to read that. Now, for updates of what's going on with the show, you can go to blogtalkradio.com. And what you want to do is click on programs, and you will come up with the Produce Justice show. You want to click that bad boy, and then you can enter into the chat. There's a place where you can enter into the chat room, and you can do that. Now, for those of you who are new to the program and want a review of last week's program, the talking points, constructive action items has listed 7 suggested items on the page. I'm not going to read them all, but they are there for your review of last week's program. Very, very interesting last week's program, and you can see what's going on. As a matter of fact, if you would like to hear last week's program, you can go to producejustice.com, and for the 8th of February, that program is on there, and you can get that program and see what we mean. As a matter of fact, it went overtime. Yes, it did. It went overtime, and it was good. I mean, it was very good, like this hot cup of coffee that I'm drinking right now. Man, I mean, whew, it's really, really good. Okay, so those are the numbers you want to get in. And for my boy out in L.A., Justice Warrior laughingly said, "Damn y'all L.A. folks, LOL." All right, we got that in there. Okay, thank you, Marcus, for your call in, and don't be a stranger, my brother. Okay, all righty, we're going to go to New York City, and here she is. The spotlight is on. Get ready. That's right, Helen B., you are now on with Mr. Fuller. Good morning.
Peaceful greetings, everyone. I have 2 questions. Why is it important to read the code? And if the white supremacy can use people as currency, is there any constructive value in receiving reparations in the form of money? 2 questions.
Well, we have to have a code, because a code is nothing but something that you do that always works and produces. If it's supposed to be a constructive code, produces constructive results. That's all a code is. Every time you do it, it
I'm
works.
talking about your code, Mr. Fuller. I'm talking about why is it important to read your code.
The counter-racist code is called the counter-racist code. It is designed to solve problems for non-white people, because non-white people have more problems than anybody on the planet as compared to white people, whether they're racist or not. So where is the code for black people, where black people are not always the people who are labeled as problem makers, but not problem solvers? That's our reputation. Here come the black people. Better go find some white people if you want anything done that's going to make sense, because those black people are not going to bring nothing to you, ever. This makes sense. It's just not going to happen unless there's a white person standing over them with a whip. Then they'll make sense, or making them an offer they can't refuse or something like that. And that's why black people need a code of discipline that says, if it's not constructive, I'm not doing it. See, we need that kind of code. I want constructive results out of myself, and I'm working to influence people everywhere else. This is what every black person should say. Wake up in the morning, go to bed at night. I'm going to try to do my best that everything that I do today is going to produce a constructive result. Every remark that I make to a person, every move that I make, whatever I do on the job is going to produce a constructive result. Or I'm going to try to find a way not to do it if I can, even though the white supremacists only want me to do things that produce constructive results for them. That's why we need a code. We don't have one. That's the thing that's been missing all these years. We have slogans. Slogans are supposed to give us incentive to have a code, but we never get around to code making. Well, what is a code? Do's and don'ts. That's all it is. Either you're going to do this or you're not going to do it. Either you're going to do that or you're not going to do it. Why is it you're not going to do it? Or are you going to try to find out if you're being made to do it, try to find a way around it so that you don't have to do it? Why? Because the things that you don't have to do, and you don't have to do them, and they are non-constructive if you do them, shouldn't be done. That's all a code is. That's all any code is. Now, if every black person on the planet right now, every move that they made produced a constructive result, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because black people have oceans of problems wherever you find them on the planet. That's why black people, wherever they are on the planet, are people of color. For the most part, they're saying what? Which way did the white folks go? Why?
Oh.
Because my problems will get solved if I can find me some white folks. And all the problems of the black people around me who are whining about this and whining about that and talking about this and talking about that, but they ain't solving a single problem. And some of them walking around talking about they know everything, but they can't solve a single problem in a constructive manner.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's why we need a code, problem-solving code. And that's what I've tried to write, the beginning of one.
Yes, sir. Helen, what was your second question, please? Helen, what was your second question?
My second question was if the... Okay, I wrote it down. Sorry,
yes.
I'm confused. Okay, second question. If the white supremacists can use people as currency in any constructive value, if the white supremacists can use people as currency, is there any constructive value in receiving reparations in the form of money?
Okay,
no.
Thank you.
The answer is no. I have said that this is a huge repair job, generational. And so the repairs have to be extensive over a period of time with guarantees. 1, housing, health care, education, transportation. Now, if we're talking about repairing, all of the damage has been done over a period, some people say, a couple of thousand years at least. That's when white supremacy began, at the minimum. 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. That's when white supremacy began. You got to repair 2,000 years at a minimum worth of damage to the non-white people. So it should be a slow, methodical, reasonable process for doing that, and some type of everybody lining up and getting a check. That check will be gone before the year's out, and you'll be right back in some other line somewhere again, begging again. That's what will happen under the system of white supremacy. That's why the white supremacists are considering that. They're seriously considering. hey, you black people want money. I know you're crazy about money. Once you see those Benjamins, you're going to lose your mind when you see stacks of them. I mean, you know, the truck pulling up in front of your house, and the person brings you a bundle of $100 bills in a huge, tight bundle that he can hardly carry. You're going to go crazy, all right? Oh, yeah. I mean, the Cadillacs, the Lamborghinis, the killings, the drugs. I mean, hey, we know what you're going to do. We're going to get it all back before noon the next day with most of you. Some of you know what to do with it and all like that, but not most of you. Because we got you trained. We know where the money's going. It's coming right back to us. We got you trained for that. Okay? So, cash payoff, in answer to your question, absolutely not. First thing we have to have is education. But you have to be housed while you're getting it. So you have to have guaranteed housing. And you shouldn't be allowed to sell the house. You can trade it. All right? We're going to have restrictions on our behavior. We've got to have that with the reparations. Otherwise, we're not really doing a repair job. Are you going to do a repair job when a person is strung out on drugs? I mean, you got to repair that person's mind first.
Good point. Good point. All right, Helen B., thank you for your question, and you go right back into the chat room. Helen B., all righty. People, I want you to pay a close attention as we start out the program with this word, constructive results. And if you've noticed all throughout Mr. Fuller's conversation and answering your question, that phrase or term has come up, constructive results. That is the focus, to produce constructive results. If we keep saying it, you'll get it in your mind even after the program is over with. Constructive results, whatever you do, that's what you want to do. Constructive results.
Including this program.
Including this program. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. And let's include Corey in El Paso. Okay, Corey, get ready. We're getting ready to do you. Here we go. Okay, you're in, Corey. Go ahead with your question for Mr. Fuller.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Hold on.
Good morning, sir.
Let me switch my.
Yeah. I have two really quick questions. We'll try two quick questions. First question is, so Mr. Fuller talks about how, you know, that white people worship weaponry and things like that. He doesn't talk about warfare on air. But does Mr. Fuller have a negative view of weaponry, or he sees there's no place for it? I mean, just because he briefly surmised his view of weaponry and things like that. Is there no positive?
All right,
yeah,
Mr. Fuller.
You just said it. Results. You can put positive if you want to. I prefer to use the word constructive because that sounds like you're building something, you know, that wasn't there before. So, yes, in answer to the question, everything in the universe has a usage. A butcher knife has a usage, and you can use it to cut a person's throat, okay? Or you can use it to cut a rope, to keep a person from being hanged or entangled in the rope. Release the dolphin from a net that wasn't made to catch a dolphin. So you cut that net with the knife, and the dolphin swims away, and you're trying to preserve them as a species because you be very careful about eliminating any species that you didn't create. And no people create anything. You hear people say sometimes, this is one of my creations. No, it isn't. Creation means you made something out of nothing. Now, production, you can produce things like justice and all like that. Justice is a concept that you can bring into fruition. Why? It's a concept. That's something. That's not nothing. Okay? That's a series of actions that you can take. But when you create something, you create something from the nothing, and the something that you created from the nothing you had to first create what? The nothing that the something is going to come from. Now that's a creator. Now I've never heard any person say that they made something from nothing and that they produced the nothing that the something came from.
Like Star Trek.
The mind doesn't work that far.
Okay, the second question, Mr. Well, another caveat to that question. So what about a weapon to, say, white supremacists, they are insane. So, or, they're insane in terms of their system does work for their benefit, but a lot of their things that they do they'll just murder animals for no reason, for example. What if you cut the person's throat that wants to murder this animal, and say a white supremacist, he's crazed and demented, he wants to rape a dolphin and then kill it. Can you cut the white person's throat and to prevent that murder of that animal, or is that not a positive result because you had to destroy life to save life?
Well, when it comes to destroying people, the code book, I always direct people to the code book that I have written for that, under war and counter-war. Okay? And I say that one thing, self-defense is something that the creator of the universe, that instinct, called the instinct to defend oneself. You're supposed to have that. You defend yourself against destruction. You're defending yourself when you put a rail on a bridge so that people don't try to cross the bridge and fall into the water because there's no rail there. Okay? There's nothing to stop them. If they stumble and start heading in that direction, they'll fall right over into the water, and as a result of that, they will lose their existence. So you put a rail there. That's to defend the person against death, unreasonable death, non-constructive death. And it's supposed to be the same if you have to defend yourself from a person. You're not put here to be destroyed by people. That's the assumption. Only by the Creator that put you here. And you stay here a number of years, and the Creator, whatever created you, says, well, I gave you breath to start with. Nobody's supposed to put their knee on your neck and take away that breath until I say so. And that's going to happen eventually, because you're not made. I didn't structure you in such a way that you were going to stay here in the form that you're in forever. I could do that. I don't have a reason for doing that. I got my own reasons for even creating you in the first place. So you just accept that. I do. That's according to what? Logic. But somebody else coming up and saying, I'm going to terminate you because I don't like you. I'm going to kill you. Now, the code says you do everything you can to defend yourself against a person who has this particular position or intention. You do everything that you can to defend yourself, including take them out of this universe as swiftly as possible, if that's what they intend to do to you unjustly. That's it.
That's it.
Self-defense.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Thank you, Corey. Since you added that caveat, that has to be constituted as a third question. So we can't allow you to ask 3 questions. Sorry about that. You just have to ask whatever questions you have to answer. All right, let's do this. Mr. Fuller, this is the time where we are to talk about your book. I see that it is on the eastern side of this concept called the United States. It's 9:50. So we're going to give you a few moments to speak about your book. Thank you for listening, Corey. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Yeah, I've been speaking about the book all morning long because what a lot of the things that I'm saying, basically, all of the things that I'm saying, are in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. If you're not a victim of white supremacy, then the book probably does not apply to you in any way, shape, or form. So don't purchase the book unless you think you can get something out of it that will help you produce constructive results that the white supremacists are opposed to you having. And all the problems that you have, the book is supposed to help you to solve them, assuming that you're in the system that's keeping you from solving problems. And it's working against you in solving problems that will produce in a manner that will produce constructive results in all areas of activity, your economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And it's called a compensatory counter-racist code. It's supposed to work against racism and for the victims of racism in such a manner that you get constructive results in every move that you make and everything that you say and how you say it to people. Because it's all about do's and don'ts and how to respond when people say things to you. Like name calling, for instance. A person calls you a name. That N-word now is becoming, shows up every now and then in great prominence. Right now it's on television. Somebody used it, and they lost their job, and there's a lot of going back and forth. Well, the code's supposed to tell you what to do about the N-word. And I'll mention that later on in the program, maybe, if I get to it. Because it's resurfaced. It keeps resurfacing all over the place, all the time. And it bothers people. And the code's supposed to tell you what to do about it. It's supposed to tell you what to do about everything. That's what a code is supposed to do. I'm not saying my book does it, but you can get the book by going to Produce Justice, and I tried to do my best to show you a lot of it is the damage that's done to people, and a lot of the progress that people make is done with words. So I even have a word guide. You use these words in a certain way, in a certain manner, and don't use other words in a certain way, in a certain manner, and you get constructive results. You can get the volumes by going to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com. And all of the instructions related to what we're talking about in this program are there.
Okay. All righty. Producejustice.com. For those who might be new to the program, now, first of all, we're focusing on, you're going to hear this term, constructive results. And that's what the focus is going to be on. So those who are going to reproduce this program, constructive results. And you want to use logic when you do that. Logic being cause and effect. Mr. Fuller used the term butcher knife. Okay, why was a butcher knife created? Okay, you could say that might be a cause. Well, what is the effect of that butcher knife being produced? What are you going to do with it? Cause and effect. You have to use logic. You got to think about it. In the chat room, they're just simply saying you got to follow the code, a code to do whatever it is that you're going to do to produce constructive results. So you will hear from time to time on this program a code being that something is going to work not sometime, but every time. Every time. You got to do that. Okay, let's see here. And I think at the bottom of the hour, Mr. Fuller, I'm going to give you a chance to speak about that N-word. Very interesting, something that is going on here. And I'm looking at my clock, so I'm going to have Robert contact me about that to see if I have the right streaming time on this clock. In the meantime and in between time, let's go to New York, and New York is always representing, and we go to Darnell. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, sir.
Good morning,
I have a VGQ. Oh, good morning. I have a VGQ if that's fine, Mr. Bobby.
Yes, sir.
My VGQ today is that I believe the simplicity of the system of white supremacy is what makes it so powerful, and to counter it, I believe the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, a compensatory counter-racist code, the 2016 version by Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., revised expanded edition, is it's the simplicity of that code is also what makes it powerful. Mr. Bobby, can I stay on the line, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Oh, what was the question?
Hey, Darnell, could you get that VGQ again, please?
There was no question,
That was a VGQ, right?
Yes.
Oh, well, you made your remark, and people should think about it, and that's all I have to say, because you said what you said. That's what the code requires me to say if you say what your opinion is on anything that deals with race, racism, or counter-racism. That's a part of the code. And I'm required, if a person gives his or her opinion, whether I agree with it or not, to simply say, he said what he said, or she said what she said, or they said what they said. And I can't go any further than that, than to have people, direct people in the direction of think about what was said and try to use it to do what? Produce a constructive result.
Alrighty. Got that. Alrighty. Thank you, Darnell. Just to refresh people, when you call in and you want to ask a question or give a VGQ, you can ask a question and you can do a short VGQ. Now, in your question, while you're asking it, if you add a caveat to that question, then that's going to nullify your second question if you have one. So keep that in mind, because I see that it could lead to some people asking three questions, and that's not going to work on this 2-hour window that we have. Now, I'm not saying that somebody will try to be slick, but you know, we got to have clarity on that. Mr. Fuller, we got 1 minute and 36 seconds before we close out this first hour. I'm going to give that to you before we start the second hour. So go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Well, I'll just say that since that's not very much time for me to talk about that N-word, I'll do that in the next hour.
Yes, sir.
People can just go to producejustice.com and get the code book. That'll be an excellent start toward problem solving in such manner as to produce constructive results for you as an individual person of color in a system of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
You need problem solved.
Problem solving.
In all of the areas of activity. Economics, probably more in some areas than in others. But in alphabetical order, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, or war. Almost every black person on the planet has a problem of some kind in one or more of those areas of activity. Mm-hmm. This book is supposed to help you to solve that problem, whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
Wherever you happen to be in the system of white
leave it there. Okay, that's the end of the first hour. Thank you all for listening to the first hour. to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller. Stay tuned for the second hour, commencing in 5 seconds. Alrighty, welcome back to the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on blogtalkradio.com. Thank you for listening. The contact numbers are 516-453-9921 is the contact number, and make sure you press the number 1 button if you have a question or a VGQ. We do ask, please ma'am, please sir, to keep it short. You can do that. You can also go to the chat room by going to the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com, and that will go in rotation and will be read at a particular time. I will inform you of that. Also, the chat room is available. They blowing up again this week. Yeah, that's what I said. They are blowing up in there. All you have to do is go to blogtalkradio.com. You want to click on programs of Produce Justice Show or Produce Justice. You click on that bad boy, and then an icon for the chat room is to come up, and then you can press that bad boy, and you are in the house and get in with the chat along with 9 people, including my man from L.A., Swaz in there, Rita Triple A, Justice Warrior, Invisible Negro, yes, Emery Lumumba, JJ Home Loans is there, Constructive Action Items is there, BSAM 721, many more in there, and they be talking, y'all, oh yeah. All righty, for those new to the program, we are discussing and all this material is in Mr. Fuller's book that you can get by going to producejustice.com. Our focus today is on constructive results, CR, constructive results. Whatever you do, you want to get a constructive result, and that means you have to follow a code. What do you mean, a code? Something that's going to work every time. You got to follow the code in order to produce justice and get a constructive result. Okay, before we go to, I think it's, before we go to Joe, I got to take time out. Mr. Fuller, you talked about you were going to say something about the N word. Everybody that I know is interested in your thoughts about the N word. So have at it, Mr. Fuller.
Well, it's in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. First of all, if it's a problem, if the N-word is a problem, how are all problems solved? Through questions and answers. There's no exception to that universal law, not one. All problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. So if someone uses the so-called N-word, the first thing you want to do is ask a question. Not start running up in circles and jumping up and down and screaming and throwing things. Ask a question. If you are called by the so-called N-word, what do you do? What's the best thing to do according to a counter-racist code if it's supposed to be associated with racism or associated with anything that's not constructive? If it sounds like somebody's calling you by any title and any name that's non-constructive, you have a question. Don't make a statement. Don't start trying to find a name to call them. Ask a question. That's the logical process. That's the way you solve problems and produce the most constructive results every time, not sometime, every time. Ask questions. Enough questions to get the correct answers to produce that constructive result. So if someone says, well, let's start with this question. The N-word. recently it's been showing up in the news again. I understand some white person used the term, and they're having to explain themselves and all like that. Well, let's just talk about the word itself. When anybody uses it, for any reason, what's the procedure? A question. And so one statement that is made about the use of the N-word, recently they say the N-word is the worst word in the English language. I have heard that several times. It's the worst thing that a person can be called. Now, you got words like robber, you got words like thief, you got words like arsonist, rapist, liar. You got all kinds of words that are supposed to be something or indicate it's something that a person should not be. And that's why they say that, hey, you call a person a robber, well, now, you should have some questions. A person who is accused of robbery, and they know they didn't rob anybody, or they think that they didn't, well, they have questions. That person, I know if I'm accused of it, I want to know, well, wait a minute, who did I rob? When? Where? Because robbery means I took something from somebody and I shouldn't have. I didn't have a constructive reason for doing that. I didn't have a just reason for doing that. Balance between people. So, you calling me one? Is that an accusation, a robber? Okay, well, let's deal with it. What does a robber do? Whom did I rob? What do you mean by robbery? So the N-word is the same category as every other word. It doesn't mean anything until you say what it means. And they say that it is the worst thing in the English language that a person can be called. That's something I've heard recently. Now, I never heard that before until just the last few years. That is the worst possible thing that a person can be called in the entire English language. Think about that. Of all the words that a person can be called, there's nothing worse in the English language than the so-called N-word. So you should have three basic questions according to the code. What is a, and you can use N-word, which it's becoming so volatile now that you can't even say it. Not on the air in the northwestern hemisphere, at least, without getting in some kind of trouble. So you have to call it the N-word, okay, even when you're describing it. I guess you even have to do that in a university now. You can't call it, spell it out like it is in a dictionary, in a college dictionary, or even in a elementary school dictionary. They'll say it's the N-word, but that's not what they say in the dictionary. They call it what it is, the whole word, right down to the last letter, R, okay? But we call it, it's becoming so volatile, you can't call it what it is on the air. And so, what is it? What is a and the N-word? That's the first question you should have. If anybody calls you that, you should say, what is it? What are you calling me? Say, I just told you. You say, well, why is it that it's the worst word in the English language? That's a basic question. They call it the worst word in the English language. Why is it the worst word in the English language? Why? Why? And then another question can be, how can a person prove not being an N-word? If you're going to prove that you're not what that person just called you, how would you go about doing it? I'm going to prove that I'm not that. Now, how are you going to do it? After identifying what it is. That's the first thing you want to get straight. What is it? Because I ran across it researching this morning. Research meaning going back and taking another look. I looked in a different dictionary from what I usually looked at. And on page 892 of the Webster's College Dictionary by Random House out of New York, on page 892 of the 1999 edition, it has an updated version of what the N-word is. And it fits what I've had in the textbook for years. A victim of oppression, et cetera, et cetera. That's what it says in the dictionary. But I said outright, in order to qualify for the N-word, the only logical definition that word can have, logic, I'm talking about using logic, is that if you are the N-word, it means what? You are a victim of white supremacy. So another question would be, well, Fuller, does that N-word fit you? And the answer is yes. You say, well, is that what you're going to admit to the world? Is that what you are if you're called that? And the answer is yes. Because that's what it means. If you're a victim of white supremacy, that's what you are. The word can't mean anything else. That's why it's so powerful and so mysterious. Because when you ask somebody, what is it, you don't get an answer. You just get somebody laughing or something like that. But they won't tell you what it is. They'll tell you that's what you are, but they won't tell you what the word means. Except for the first time I've seen it in a dictionary, and that was this morning. I saw it for the first time. They tell you why it's an offensive term or why it's the worst term. And they say, because you're a person of color, in so many words, who is being oppressed. Okay? It's not because you have color in your skin. It's because you have color in your skin and you are being oppressed based on that color. Well, by that definition, you better believe that's what I am. So I don't have a problem with the word. The problem with the word before was when it didn't have a definition that made sense. They would just tell you it's a derogatory term for a person who is classified as non-white or a person who is classified as black. But here in this dictionary, they finally, after all of these years, and it's a 1999 edition. I don't see why college professors and all like that, since they're right there in a college, haven't caught that in their dictionaries. You got dictionaries in a college. I caught it this morning for the first time, an updated version, and that's a 1999 version. 1999. And I was saying it back in the 1950s. They say, well, Fuller, when somebody calls you that, whether they're black or white, what does that mean? I said, it means I'm a victim of white supremacy. That's what it means. That's why it doesn't make me angry, because I own up to that. And you better believe that's what I am. And when I stop being one, I'll stop being one. When I'm no longer a victim of white supremacy. Because that is the only logical definition. But they have gotten away for years by just laughing, if that's their emotional reaction, when they use the word and call you that, a white person calling a black person that, they just laugh, but they don't tell you what it means. See, words have power, or they lose power, when you give them the meaning of it. That word loses power in support of white supremacy when I say that I am one, according to the logical definition. And I say I'm trying not to be one by doing what? Getting rid of the system of white supremacy so I won't be a victim of it. That's how I stop being one. Not by telling somebody not to call me one, because they're telling the truth. But that's Neely for. Now, everybody out there listening, they can make up their own minds. But that's why I've said for years, I can go on any job, and you can use that term all day long. Because all you're doing is saying and implying, if you're white, that I am a person who is being oppressed on account of my color, and that I should be. Now, when I can interpret that way, and I can get somebody to buy into it, that I should be, that thing that you call me, that's what I should be, and should be treated like one, okay? Now I got something to work with. But a white supremacist who is really skilled would never tell you what the word means.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But they'll have you running around in circles and jumping up and down and screaming and running into the wall and want to shoot and cut because the person called you that. And they're still laughing because they know you don't know what it means. That's what a laugh is.
Yes, sir. Okay, that's Neely Fuller on his review of the N-word. Before we move on, this question came up. Mr. Fuller, today, Mr. Fuller, you said that white supremacy, I'm reading Gmail, has been going on for at least 2,000 years. Mr. Fuller, could you please lead me to the literature or the evidence that the white supremacy has been going on?
I've heard people say that.
For that
I haven't seen that in print.
Okay.
I have not seen that in print. I have not seen anything in print that I remember except the 2,000-year figure, the 4,000-year figure, the 6,000-year figure, and recently the 800,000 figure. 800,000 years. 800,000 years, I think I've said on the air. Now, that's a huge stretch. That white supremacy has been around 800,000 years, I don't believe that. But that 2,000 years, maybe even the 6,000 years, sounds reasonable. That sounds reasonable. Because I know the so-called Roman Empire was at its height about 2,000 years ago. I've read that, okay, at its greatest. And they had black people as slaves in Rome. Lots of them. And they used them as gladiators and workers of all types, just like slaves are used all over the world for anything. Now, that's 2,000 years ago. So that's why I'm saying I've seen that. I've seen pictures of it and all like that, drawings, not photographs. All right.
Do you remember what volume of books that you got that information from?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I know in the movie I, Claudius, they showed the first emperor, Caesar Augustus. He was the first emperor of Rome, and he had some entertainers come in, and they were all black females, and they were naked. All right? They were naked, and they were shaking their behinds, entertaining Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, in a TV series by BBC called I, Claudius. It was either in the first or the second of 13 episodes where they had that scene. I think
that's one of your movie lists. That's one of your movie lists. It's on the
movie list, right.
Yeah, okay. All righty. All right, thank you, Mr. Fuller. Let's go to Joe. Joe, man, we cooking in New York today. New York, Joe, Harlem. Go ahead, baby.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Mr. Bobby.
Yes,
my question for you, Mr. Fuller, is what's the difference from a white person and a white supremacist?
A white person is just a person who's white. And a white supremacist is a person that practices deceit and violence against a non-white person. That's the difference. White supremacy, white supremacists are acting in a hostile manner in all 9 areas of activity against people who are classified as non-white. A white person is just a white person. Like a white baby is a white baby, not a white supremacist. It's not logical to think that a white baby is a white supremacist. It's not logical to think that. Why? Because first of all, to be a white supremacist, you have to know one color from another. You have to have that qualification. Presumably, a newborn baby does not know one color from another. So a white baby, logically speaking, cannot perform under the description of a white supremacist. Neither can a white person who may have been a white supremacist. If they have reached the stage where they can't tell one color from another, old age or senility or whatever you want to call it, but they can't tell one color from another. Can't tell a spoon from a fork. Now that white person who might have been 50 years ago or 70 years ago or whatever, known as a white supremacist and said that he or she was one. But that white person now, even though they are still white, they're not white supremacists. Why? Because they don't know their colors. Don't know a spoon from a fork. So that's not a white supremacist. You could say that the person used to be, because that's the truth. So you always go with the truth. Go with the truth. Go with the truth. Because the only thing that you do when you don't go with the truth is you go in with a falsehood. And a lot of black people love to go with something that's not true, something that is false, if it makes you feel good.
Yes. Okay.
And we got to get out of that, because that is strictly anti-code.
Yes,
sir. Trying to chase something down that makes you feel good. Drugs make you feel good, but it doesn't make you good. Just feeling like you're good. Whatever that means.
Whatever that means. All right. Thank you, Harlem Joe, for your question. Let's go down into Dallas. Boy, what's going on in the state of Texas? Ray, every day. Ray, go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. I have two concise questions.
Make it.
Mr. Fuller, have you ever had difficulty looking white people in the eye, and do you have any advice?
Wait a minute. One question at a time, Ray. One question at a time.
Yes,
right.
I had difficulty looking white people in the eye when I was all through my teens and right up till I finished high school, because I was trained to kind of look at the wall, look down at my shoes, take my hat off and look at it the whole time I'm talking. But kind of look like you're looking at something out the window while you're listening, mostly. Because you didn't do much, where I was raised up, you didn't do much talking to white people. You did a whole lot of listening, because you better watch what you say when you talk. So
yes,
I
sir.
had to be real careful about what I said. So in answer to the question, yes, I have feared doing that, because they didn't like it. They didn't like it, okay? But later on, they say that, hey, you can look me in the eye. I give you permission to look me in the eye. So now I look white people in the eye, and have been doing it for a number of decades. But right up until the time that I was about, I'll say 22, 23, or at least until the time that I first went into the Army. That's the first time I've been around a whole lot of white people at once in a close-up setting where you're talking to them every day. all right? Because in the town that I came from, you didn't even talk to white people unless they were ready to talk to you. Okay.
Wow. Okay. Hey, Ray, what's your second question?
Mr. Fuller, how would you decode the phrase, all is fair in love and war?
I would ask the person who used that term. I wouldn't decode it any kind of way except to use the code to ask that question. All problems are solved through the process of questions and answers, if that could be a problem. So if a person uses that expression, professor or anybody else, white or non-white, and it's in a setting, any kind of setting where I don't understand what's being said, you ask questions. What does that mean? Not what it means when somebody else says it, what it means when the person that you're talking to says it. Because the same thing sometimes means different things depending on who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. So you always want to address the person that you're talking to who is using the term or the set of terms. Mm-hmm. All's fair in love and war. I don't know what that means except to ask the person who is using the term. That particular person, not the person standing next to him.
Okay.
That's the codified procedure.
Codified procedure. Thank you, Ray. Thank you very, very much. Let me do this. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here, heard on blogtalkradio.com. Now, this show, the 15th of February, will be reproduced on ProduceJustice.com almost immediately after today's airing of the program, so you can get this show and all other or previous shows that we have done. You can listen to them all. Please, ma'am, please, sir, do that at your convenience. You'll be glad you did. All righty. Now, if you would like to be a part of the remaining moments of today's show, just simply dial 516-453-9921 and be sure to press the number 1 button if you have a question or VGQ, which is a comment. And please, ma'am, please, sir, make it short so that we can get it in the time frame that has been allotted to us. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. For the most part, your Gmail will not, N-O-T, capital N-O-T, will not be read today, but it will be read at some date and time in the future, and I will inform you of when it is going to, or when it is read, and you can go back and listen to it or whatever you need to do with that. Okay. There was something else I was going to say, but it just slipped my mind. Anyway, that's not hard to do. Mr. Fuller, before we go back into the calls, because we are going to go down to Stan here, have you gotten any notice when you will be on this month's edition of the Carl Nelson Show as of yet?
The answer is no.
Okay. The answer is no. Okay, I'm sure that when you do, the producers will let me know when you will be on it, and I will inform my people when Mr. Fuller is on the Carl Nelson Show, but not this week. Okay.
And it will also be on the website, ProduceJustice.com.
ProduceJustice.com. Thank you so much, Mr. Fuller. Thank you for that. The focus of today's show is CR, constructive results. We want to focus in on that because whatever you do from here on out, you want to focus on constructive results using logic. What do you mean? Cause and effect. Keeps you focused in on what you have to do. Stan, the man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good morning, gentlemen. Has anyone over the last couple of weeks asked any questions about the pending Supreme Court Justice nomination?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to my knowledge.
I'll stick with that. Okay, I'll stick to that, and we're talking about constructive results. And I know that, they're talking about a black woman being nominated, and I couldn't help but to notice, it was brought to my attention, rather, I should say. And when we're talking about, constructive results, I guess it's safe we can assume that when white supremacists do things, that they're doing it to be constructive towards the system of white supremacy. And so about 8 of the black women who were on the list as possibilities, half of them were involved and married to white males. And when you look at even the other black Supreme Court justices, Clarence Thomas, many people know he's married to a white woman, and even Thurgood Marshall, his first wife died young, but his second wife was a Filipino woman, and even our vice president, Mrs. Harris, is married to a white man. And so my question is that how do you feel about that, Mr. Fuller? And is that surprising to you that these women or these people would be involved with a white person as a spouse? And I'd like to stay on the line to hear.
All righty. Mr. Fuller?
No, it's not surprising. In fact, that's to be expected. So that the real power is whomever the white person is. Now, in the case of Judge Thurgood Marshall, the term Filipino was used. Mm-hmm. Now, it depends on whether or not the lady who is called Filipino is in the white or the non-white category. Now, I've seen pictures of her, and she appears to be non-white. White supremacy is about doing things that are harmful to non-white people. That's what white supremacy is for. They get fun, they get glory, and they get material comfort out of abusing and using in a destructive way their ability to be harmful to non-white people. That's what white supremacy means, in order for the benefit of people who are classified as white. That's what it means, being a member of the white race, which is the only race. There's no such thing as another race. When you say white supremacy, that's it. That's the only race of people. The only reason for anybody being a member of a race is to practice racism. Black people have never been members of a race. Members of tribes, yes, but never members of a race. But we've been taught by the white supremacists that we are members of a race. Now, it's the same way with the female who is called Filipino. You first have to find out, is she classified and function as a white person, because the white supremacists determine what category you're going to be in, white or non-white. They determine it, not the person. The white supremacists in the system of white supremacy will say who's white and who's not. Mm-hmm. And they arbitrarily do that. So I tend to believe that the lady, in the case of Judge Thurgood Marshall, who was called Filipino, was non-white. So she wouldn't come under that category.
Oh, okay.
Of a white woman.
FYI for all the callers that are online, the chat room has some very interesting discussions that are going on that might just be worth your peek. Go to blogtalkradio.com and you want to go to shows where it says the Produce Justice Show, click on that, and then when you do, there'll be an area where you can click and go into the chat room and look at some of the discussions that are taking place in there. Quite interesting, to say the least. Quite interesting. And remember, all the books and materials that are being discussed in this program can be obtained by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. Okay, get ready. We're going to go way out to Kansas. Somebody told me there's nothing that grows out there but wheat. I don't know, but I do know this. Chris, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, Chris.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on, man.
Oh, I'm sorry. I never got the introduction. Okay, so I'm on. Okay, here's the question. This is actually a DGQ. Mr. Fuller, some black people say that there's no such thing as white supremacy, but I thought about this. The people who own all the apple trees in the state of Washington are people who classify themselves as white. The people who own all the potato farms in Idaho are people who classify themselves as white. All the oil, all the gas, all the natural gas, all the coal in West Virginia, and all the fruit trees in Florida and California. Even this English language that's coming out of these black bodies is part of white supremacy. This English language is not supposed to be coming out of this brown-skinned body, so that's part of white supremacy. So I'll wrap it up by saying this. If I want a box of cereal, I got to come to a person who's classified as white to get some money for which he owns all the money and he owns the cereal. That's just the VGQ for people who say that white supremacy don't exist, and to get what do you think about that?
Okay, thank you, Chris.
I think if they make a flat statement and that person is non-white, now if the person is white, I will say there is such a thing as white supremacy. It's the most powerful government on the planet here in the year 2022. It's the most powerful government, not only this year, but in recorded history, in all 9 areas of activity on this particular planet. I don't know about other planets. The system of white supremacy. There's no government that's ever been more powerful than, in capital letters, the system of white supremacy. According to what? Neely Fuller? According to the evidence, not according to Neely Fuller. So that's what Neely Fuller says. Now, if a non-white person says there's no such thing as a system of white supremacy, and many a person has said that to me, and I say what I'm required to say, and that is, according to the code, he said what he said. Or if in the case of a female, she said what she said. If they're non-white. Why? They can say anything they want to say. But I'm going to say there is such a thing as white supremacy, and not only that, it governs everything that I do. It's the most powerful political and religious force in my existence. Nothing is more powerful than that. On the face of the earth, other than what the Creator has me into. But here on the planet, white people who believe in white supremacy allow me to do whatever I'm allowed to do and disallow me on whatever I'm disallowed to, and nobody has the muscle or has proven that they got the muscle to overrule any of them.
Okay.
That's been my experience.
Your experience.
Then go by their experiences. Now, there are black people who say, hey, nobody never did anything against me on account of my color. I mean, they tried, but they can't play that stuff with me because I do what I want to do. Don't none of them tell me what to do ever, and I got to do it. Okay?
Okay.
Well, I say go ahead and say that and go ahead and keep doing it if it's working. Because, hey, that. You can't do what the white supremacists, you're black, and you can't do what the white supremacists tell you to do. You're not going to do it, never have done it. And if you have done it, I mean, you're not doing it now. Well, teach everybody else how to do that, including me.
Including me.
I'm trying to figure that one out.
Yeah. I'm in that boat myself. Like this, I'm a little confused. You didn't do this, Mr. Fuller, but LPD, you did not see what you thought you saw, or you did not hear what you thought you heard. LPD, legitimate political disclosure, or whatever that is. Somebody tell me, what the hell does that mean? Steve, Long Beach, you're in. Okay, Steve, you're not in? Okay. Let's go to Swa. Swa, wait a minute. Let me see if I get this in here, Swa. Yeah, the real title town here in this concept. Swa, there you go. Go ahead, Swa, you're on.
Greetings, Mr. Bobby. Greetings, Mr. Neely Fuller.
Greetings.
Mr. Neely Fuller, I come into contact with a lot of younger victims of racism and the so-called schools. And a lot of them communicate to me that they hate their lives, or they want to die, or that they don't care if they die. What are some of the things that you suggest I tell these younger victims of racism?
Victims of racism who say they don't care if they die?
Like younger victims of racism, like students from K through 12, elementary students are telling me that they don't care about their existence all that much.
That's what you tell them, and they tell you what?
No, they tell me they communicate to me that they want to die, or they don't care about living or existing.
You ask
and
questions.
I hear these comments.
That's a problem. And how do you solve problems? Ask questions. Why is it you don't care? You can start with that question. Always start with what they're telling you. And then when they make another statement. Always ask people what those statements mean, and go on asking questions until you get all of the answers to what those statements mean. This is how all problems are solved, because that's a real problem. If a person is walking around saying they don't care if they die, and they're reasonably healthy and fit and moving around, and they say they don't care if they die, usually people do a lot of things to keep from dying. So you just simply ask, why is it you don't care? That's the first question. And don't argue about the answers that you get. Just be ready with the next question. That's the codified procedure. Never argue about the answers that you get to a question that you ask anybody. Just move to the next question. Why? Because that's the fastest way to get to the final question and the final answer that will solve the problem.
All righty. Thank you, Swa. Thank you so much. I know you're listening, so thank you very much. That term, by the way, was a legitimate political discourse. Yeah. I don't know why I want to say disclosure, but discourse. I don't know what that means. Somebody help the brother out. Very confusing to me, but I think that might stem from that January the 6th stuff. You didn't see what you thought you saw, or you didn't hear what you thought you heard. Anyway, I got to look for the constructive result in that, using focus, logic, cause and effect, and I'm still thinking about that butcher knife that Mr. Fuller talked about. Mike, in the land of the red, which I was told, Oklahoma. Go ahead, Mike. You're in.
Hello?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You're in.
Yeah, thank you. No one told me that I was cute, so I apologize. But I just wanted to add a VGQ in terms of racial classification that Mr. Fuller always talks about. What's really helped me to sort of understand it is not to think of race in terms of color, but in terms of status and experience. So I always think of white as a status as opposed to a skin color, because there are people who will be, as Mr. Fuller puts it, classified as white that don't look white. And in terms of the brown and black people particularly, I think that we have to, or at least I, think of the experience that we have based on these conditions of white supremacy. So I wondered if that might help people in terms of confusion, as opposed to just thinking about skin color, thinking about the status that white supremacy can bestow on people to be white supremacists, and the experience that other people can have based on that status. Thank you.
You are welcome, Mike, and don't be a stranger.
I won't be. Thank you, Mr. Bobby. Have a great day, Mr. Fuller.
You are welcome, sir. All righty. Yeah, one of these days, Mr. Fuller, I'm going to ask you about why they call Oklahoma the land of the red, if you know. But while we have this time, we're going to go to a question from the Gmail by Mr. Duncan. Mr. Duncan says this: Mr. Fuller, why did the creator of the universe create gender? Or what purpose? What purpose does gender serve? I would think, in order, why are the white supremacy racism creating confusion by creating a larger minority group? Could you please expound?
I don't know. I don't know why the Creator created anything.
Okay. Okay, I'm responding to that, putting it down there. You don't know, okay. Would you care to expound on why you don't know?
I don't know why I don't know, except I just don't know. That's the answer. I don't know why the Creator created anything. I could ask the Creator, I guess.
Yes,
and the Creator, people have said that they have talked to the Creator, so I guess so that's why I have to stand in line and ask my question to the Creator, because only the Creator knows why the Creator created. In my opinion, it might be somebody else that knows that the Creator told, but I don't know. I didn't get that message.
Yeah. Okay. For those of you that I did respond back on the Gmail, I meant to say 2022. I think I said 2021, but it is 2022, so that you know what's going on. Mr. Fuller did not answer your question last year. Okay, Mr. Fuller, here we go. We need to discuss
what question?
Questions that you have already answered. See, as you speak, sometime I respond back to the people to let them know that you are responding to their question. And I made a mistake by saying 2021 when I should have said 2022. So I'm correcting that. But while on that, and we are focusing on constructive results, this is the time for you to speak about your book. So go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Okay, all the things that I've been talking about, like the N-word and all like that, that's covered in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. What do you say when you're called that on the job? What would Neely Fuller say? You know, I don't even have to think about it. It just rolls right off because I have a code. And that's an easy one. I mean, that's real easy. And so, you know, I just have 3 questions, for instance. Comes right out of the textbook. That's what the textbook is for. That's what a code is for. You don't have to do a lot of last-minute thinking. You don't have to do a lot of foot shuffling and head scratching or screaming and yelling and throwing things before you stop and think about what's going on. You don't have to do much thinking because you just follow the code. It just comes automatic if you practice it enough. Why? Because it works. So if somebody, for instance, in the textbook, it says, somebody calls me the N-word, for instance, I have a question to the person who's calling me that. Or use the word, I say, what is it? That's the first thing I want to know. What is that you're calling me?
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of what the person says as an answer, my next question is going to be, are you calling me that? To make sure that I got that straight. And whatever the answer is, I accept the answer. I'm asking them. You ask a person a question, what you're looking for is an answer, not an argument. Because the questions and answers are going to lead right where they need to lead to. That's a guarantee. I mean, it might not satisfy everybody, might not satisfy anybody, but that's the nature of questions and answers when you do it in a codified manner. And that's what the textbook is all about. See, why are you calling me that? Okay? And then the next question is, what do you do about, with, for, or against that N-word, that thing that you called me? What do you do about it? Because everything comes down to what you do. Like I said, and saying all these programs, black people are trained to act according to their feelings. They're trained by the white supremacists. Act according to how you feel. Don't do any thinking at all. Don't try to put a column of figures together. Just throw them out there any kind of way and hope that it works out all right, because that's how you feel about it. All right? So we are taught not to ask and answer questions. And so since we know that we are taught that by people who do not want correct things to happen to us, want all the incorrect things to happen, we should do just the opposite. Ask questions, because all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. And I'm saying all of that because that's what the textbook for victims of white supremacy say is missing among the non-white people of this entire planet. That's why we still have that color problem, because we haven't tried to solve it by doing the most logical thing, questions and answers, and coming up with answers that can be codified, meaning every time that you do it or say it, it works. That's what a code is. And stop just doing anything any kind of old way and hope that it works out. Which is what we have been doing and keep doing over and over again.
Yes,
sir. You can get the volumes by going to producejustice.com. Basically, it's all about what to do and what to say in every circumstance. Producejustice.com.
Okay, in our remaining moments, Mr. Fuller, would you say that since we are focusing on constructive results, would you say, based on historical evidence, that when you focus on, you focus on constructive results, in your opinion, does that, and following the code, does that cause you not to be confused?
Oh, absolutely. Confusion is the enemy of constructive results. That's why the white supremacists do everything to confuse black people, non-white people, in every area of activity, going in alphabetical order. Economics, confusion. Even when it comes to talking about reparations, confusion, rather than thinking logically about what will produce the most constructive result. Okay? Education. Here it is, 2022, and you're still arguing about what can be taught in a classroom.
Yes, sir.
And what can't be taught. Chaos and confusion. people coming into the classroom shooting guns. That's confusion. I mean, that interferes with studying, okay? But this is the kind of stuff that the system of white supremacy breeds.
Okay.
And it spills over whether it affects them, because what you put out in the form of something that's poisonous as a system of white supremacy, you will get some of that poison back.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the white supremacists are learning that now.
Yes, sir. Okay. Well, now, would you say, based, again, on historical evidence or facts, that the use of distractions or distraction by the white supremacists is further use to the employment of that confusion?
Yes, if I understand the question. And
yeah. In other
yes.
words, they have you talking about critical race theory. That's just an example, critical race theory, but they use many others to keep you from focusing on the constructive result to end white supremacy. So they have you off on that, and you're arguing about this or that and the other.
Yes, it can be used that way. It certainly is that you. It certainly confuses me.
Yes.
What they call CRT
confuses
me because I don't know what they're talking about. What's critical about a race theory? Well, I mean, what makes it critical as opposed to what? Asking questions now. You got critical race theory. Well, if you got critical race theory, once that's explained, which I haven't understood, I haven't heard any kind of explanation that makes sense to me. And how is that different from non-critical race theory? See, because if you got critical race theory, you, logically speaking, must have race theory that is not critical. So what's the difference between the two?
Yes.
But I haven't even gotten the critical race theory straight yet. Yet everybody's all up in arms about what critical race theory is or isn't. Haven't even got past that yet.
Yeah.
At least I'm asking the question, well, what are you talking about? You either have a race theory or you don't. It's either theoretical or it's the truth. You're either telling the truth or you're not. What's the problem here?
What's the problem?
You're either telling the truth or not.
This is why at the beginning
you don't
of
want
the
the truth told? Why?
What? Right. Why? This is why at the beginning of the textbook, or even at the beginning of every program that I have been on with you, and even on the Carl Nelson show, I've heard him repeat that famous statement that this seems like people misinterpret it, but you often say that if you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything that you understand will only confuse you.
Yes.
I mean, that is
why
so powerful.
I put it in the 2016 edition of the basic book.
Yeah.
Revised Expanded Edition. I took a whole page just to say that.
A whole page.
It's just that one statement.
Yes.
On a page. It's the same way in the Word Guide.
Yes.
Now, in the original 1984 edition, I had it in small print on one of the earlier pages, on one of the inside pages. And that's the only place I put it. But I put it in bold print, taking up a whole page in the 2010 edition of the Word Guide, and later in the 2016 edition of the updated version of the textbook for victims of white supremacy that you can get. Either one or all of them, depends on what you want, what you're looking for, by going to producejustice.com. If you don't understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will confuse you. That's either true or false.
That's either true or false. Got to leave it there, but that's a good place to leave it. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, all of the callers. Thank you, all of the chatters. Man, y'all blew it up today. I'm proud of you. hope I can do better myself. I quit messing up, but that's a part of it. But thank you again.
Got to do better.
You got to do better. Woo, got to do better. So thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. Thank you, everybody.